Oh, it's been one of those mornings. Yeah, we've got window company here fixing the fascia boards, and it's like, oh, just chaos. And they got lost, so I've been answering the phone to them. Yeah, feeling slightly frazzled, but we shall get this done. Let me just move that back up onto here. So yeah, so if you're watching on YouTube, I'm very sorry, you're back on my laptop because I made a mess of the way I set the stream up, which meant that I couldn't get it running on my iPad. So you're back on not such nice video quality. And it was like one of those going, I haven't got time to sort this out now. It's just going to have to go. Yeah, we'll do it the way I was doing it previously, and we'll try again next month. So let me pull up the picture of the one we're doing. This month's vote was incredibly close. So there's always 3 choices in the Fellowship of Yarn, and the ones that didn't win had exactly the same number of votes, which was 1 less than the one that was the actual winner. So we have ended up with some really close colour choices. I liked all of them, so I was happy to dye any of them. Let's pull up the picture. But the winner that we are dyeing is this one, which is these pinks and greens, which I sort of called Bloom. I think it might be a magnolia blossom, but we had a colour that was called magnolia before, so I couldn't reuse that name, so I had to kind of get creative. In fact, none of the names this time were particularly creative. They were all, I was sort of a bit like, I can't decide what colour what names to give them. Naming, so there's a reason none of my fibres have names, and it's because I am just really useless at coming up with creative names for them, basically. I don't do words very well in the written form. But let's get started. Let me write down, pull out the book so we can write things down as we go. Okay, so we have got pinks and dark foresty greens and jadey greens on the go in this one. I think I dyed some pinks a while ago and went, I'm never doing pink again for Seasonal Changes one, because repeating it's really hard. Because one of the dyes that I use for doing pinks doesn't stay dissolved very well. It falls out of solution. So it ends up being, you end up with like a sort of layer of sediment that you have to get redissolved again. And it makes dyeing repeatable colourways using that an absolute pain, because unless you're absolutely certain everything's mixed back up again, if you're not, it's just, yeah, it varies in its shade too much to make repeatable colourways very easy. But we're going to use a different pink dye, and we're going to use my fluorescent pink dye instead, and alter that using reds and other shades to get to where we want to go to. That's my plan anyway. So we're going to get started. We're going to start off with the darkest colour. So as always with these packs, there's variations of dark tones, light tones, because even though we've only got we've got pinks, we've got greens, as long as we have enough tonal variation, lights and darks, they're still going to work for us to use as colour work and for stripes and things like that, and have enough contrast. So let us begin. We're going to start with the dark green. The dark green is, if anybody's looking, it's the bottom one on this shade here. And we're going to make that stay. We're going to make that using 2 of the green dyes that I've got, which come as green dyes, rather than mixing with blue and yellow. Blue and yellow makes some very nice greens, but because blue and yellow have such different heat setting points, they can separate out as they're dyeing, which is fine for quite variegated colours, but for semi-solids like these, I want a really rich dark green. So we have used 50 olive and 50 jade. Oh, my writing's dreadful this morning. Let's take a look at that and see the point that we're at. So that gives us this foresty green here. So that is very nearly, but not quite. I just want to just take the edge off it a little bit. It's a little bit too green. So I'm going to use some black, but I don't want a full measure of black, so I just need to grab a syringe to pull out a smaller amount. But yeah, I was out all day yesterday at a dog competition, so sort of come in this morning. I've packed up the parcels for sending, packed up the Gradient Club parcels. I've packed up all the orders that had come in. Then the window people were ringing because they got lost. So it's like going, come in here for peace and quiet. So you can see just by adding that little bit of black, we've just muted the colour down ever so slightly and made it, I think, a closer match to the original colour inspiration. So I'm happy with that one. We're going to do the next green shade. Stay propped up there. So the other green shade is got it's far more what I describe as being a jade green. So it's got much more blue toned to it. It's still reasonably dark. The two lightest colours are the ones that are in the pink end, but I don't want to make it as dark as this foresty green here. So we're going to go for 1, 2 of you. So I'm going to show you what that looks by itself, because by itself this is a very jade greeny jade. I've used it before. I think I used it in the December packs that were the sparkling baubley one, and it's beautiful for things like that when you want bright jewel tones. We want something that's a little bit calmer, so I'm actually going to grab some brown. So because the black that I use is quite purple based, it's also got quite a lot of blue in it. If I put black into that, I know from experience it starts to take it too far into the blue. And that's not what I'm after. Yeah, if as I go along you've got any questions, feel free to pop them into the chat sections. I will try and spot them. I don't always. I'm always sometimes not very good at seeing them, but if I do see them I will answer them. We're going to go for, start off with 5 of brown. Everybody can hear rumbling in the background. That's the RAF playing planes, and see where that takes us to. So it's a bit like with cooking, you can always add more salt, you can't take it out. So just by adding that brown in there, we've just knocked the bright vibrancy off. That looks quite dark at the moment, bearing in mind this has only got half the quantity of dye in as the original one. So I'm going to add a tiny little bit of water to this to make sure it will spread evenly through the fibre, and that's going to have the effect of making it look paler because there is fundamentally less dye in there. Some water in there I have. So yeah, so I always worry more about getting the colour right and knowing that I'm going to, the quantity of dye is what makes it paler rather than the, so the quality of the colour is the main thing. And then if I want to make it paler, we add more water and I just make sure that there's not too much volume of dye in there. That was a long-winded explanation. As I say, my brain this morning is not firing on full cylinders. Okay, on to the pinks, which were the ones I was not looking forward to, but we shall get them done. So we've got 3 pink shades to dye, and we need to make sure that they are different to one another. So because we've got one that is almost verging into the purple, one that is what I would describe as being a very salmony pink, and then one that is only just not white. It'd be one of those, you know, in the paint charts when you have the various shades of whites that you're left looking at going, I don't know if I can see that these are any different to one another. But that's the vibe we're going for with this one. So it's going to have a little bit of pink and a little bit of brown. And I might start off with that one. Work my way up to the darker shades. So for this one, because it is so barely any colour at all, we're going to use hardly any dye at all. So that's a tiniest bit of brown. Get the water from there. And this is the pink dye, that by itself is a really bright fluorescent pink. Let's just try one of you. Now, getting these pale colours consistent is particularly tricky. So when these packs go up for sale, everything that's for sale in one go is always from the same batch. But if you're wanting further batches, I always sort of say there is a chance they will not be exact matches, because the slightest variation in the quantity of dye on these paler colours will make a massive difference to the shade. So that is what we've ended up for with our palest colour, and that's roughly what I think we want. If it's just going to just tinge the fibre slightly. Now, bearing in mind the fibre isn't pure white like this is, the fibre's slightly creamy, so that's going to warm this shade up ever so slightly. It's going to make it slightly browner. So, but I'm happy with that. The next two pinks. So this pack's going to be quite cohesive. There's not going to be a huge number of colours going into it, and sometimes that can work quite nicely for us. That might be too much pink. It's going to be too much pink. Change of plan. I'm just trying to think of making sure that this salmony colour is not too dark, so that I don't end up with too much contrast. I end up with enough contrast between the salmon colour and the other shade. So I don't want as much as 25 of that pink. Let's go for 10 of you. That's salmon. How do I want to get to that salmon? We're going to try some orange. So at the moment, we're kind of sticking with quite bright shades. And then what I shall do afterwards, this is a rubbish syringe. Just pulling in air. There we go. 5 orange. And then we're going to put some brown into it. Let's see where we end up. Let's add a little bit of water so I can get a sense for what it's like. And I think this is going to be too pink. So that's where we've ended up. Okay. So yeah, that's not got enough of the peachy tones in that I want. I think it's a nice colour, but I don't think it's a very good match for the inspiration. And I think the palette kind of needs that pop of warmth to it. I don't want to add more dye to this, because otherwise I'm going to start risking making it too dark. So I'm going to put that to one side. It will get used up into something later. We're going to go back to the original, because I think the balance of the colours I put in are right. It's just that they're not in the right combination. So I'm going to swap round my quantity of pink and orange. So I'm going to use more orange, less pink. So that's more orange, less pink. But I'm going to keep the quantity of brown the same. That's better. So I can immediately tell that's not so pink in shade. So that's where we've ended up. So the one on the right is the pink, and then the one on the left is the one that we just mixed up. So we've got the one on the right and the one on the left. Let me have a look. My iPad switched itself off. Okay. I think spread out on fibre, I think that colour is going to be right for what we want. It's the right sort of tonal vibe for it. So by the time I've diluted it slightly more and spread it out over the fibre, I think that's going to give us that pinky peach colour that we're after. So final one colour to mix is going to be this sort of dirty, quite dirty pink. It's going to be, I want it to be darker than this one that I've just done. But not probably on a similar tonal value to the jade colour that I mixed. But so it's going to be the darkest out of the pinks. It's not going to be as dark as that foresty green. Let's pop you into that so I can use this jug. What do I want? Let's go for 25 of that pink. Gonna need some brown in it. I'm going to put a hefty chunk of brown in, but it's also going to need a little bit of black in just to shift it towards the purple. Because as I said before, this black dye has got purple in it, where it is a purple toned black, and by putting black together with that hot pink, you can make some quite nice pretty purples, but I don't want to make it too purple. It might be this one will need a little bit of red into it just to warm it up again slightly, or maybe some of the orange. Let's have a look. Let's add a bit more water to that just so I can get a better sense. But I think it's in the right ballpark. Have a look for me. Well, I think I might be happy with that. So that's the colour that we've just mixed. It always looks darker when it's fresh on, when it's wet, whereas the colour's dry. So you can see these greens, they've paled quite significantly because they've now dried out completely, whereas this is still quite wet and dark, and it doesn't necessarily, particularly on the screen, doesn't necessarily give a completely accurate representation of the colours. But I think that's going to work for us. So as ever, I always say I might change my mind. So like last time I went, oh, I'm not sure about this green that I've dyed. I think it might be too close in colour to the other shades of green in the pack. But I need to judge it when the fiber's been dyed and is dry, rather than trying to make a decision now. And I did end up going back. A huge bit of cling film, didn't need to be that big. I did end up going back and re-dyeing that green just with the same colour formula, just less of the dye, just to make it a little bit paler. That was stream side, and there is still some of that fibre in the shop. That's the shades one with the shades of green. Once I've they only get dyed during March, so each of these packs is limited edition colours. I keep dyeing them throughout the month as and when there is demand. So the more people buy, the more I dye. So it's a way of popular colours. I don't get left with colours that are not to everybody's tastes. And if there's a colour that month that you don't like, you don't have to buy it. So it's kind of a nice way of building up a whole palette of colours, and you can treat it a bit like a fibre club that you can dip in and out of. And if for some reason I can't dye that much fibre that month because I'm going away on holiday or other reasons, then it's just more limited edition. So I'm going away on holiday in May, so it might be that whatever we choose for May will be very limited edition, because there's going to be a huge chunk of time when I'm not going to be here to go and do any dyeing. So this is our dark, really dark foresty green. So I'm just making sure that the dye is evenly distributed throughout the fibre. And once I'm happy with that, we add our citric acid, because that's what causes the dyes to form a bond onto the fibre, ready for it to be heat set. Wrap it up nice and tightly. So these are all low water, low non-immersion dyeing methods, which suits fibre, works really nicely for it. So next piece, but yeah, so normally I dye in bigger quantities, but because we're just doing the colour development, I only need smaller chunks, because I want to see whether the colour's right or not. And then these get split up into 20-gram pieces and are available as seasonal changes packs in the online shop. I did have somebody contact me a couple of weeks ago now. She'd fallen in love with a couple of the colours out of one of the packs and wanted some bigger quantities of them, which is something that if I can accommodate, I will. Sometimes I haven't got time at that sort of moment to be able to do it, but a lot of the time, if I can make something work for somebody, I will try. And particularly for things like these where I have recipes, so most of the fibre that I dye doesn't have any written recipes, and I mix up the colours from scratch every single time, so there's always subtle variations. It's never quite the same. So sometimes the purples are pinker, sometimes they're browner. So even if they kind of feel like sort of the same colour, there will always be just slight differences between everything, which I quite enjoy, because it means I find dyeing lots of the same thing over and over again really boring. It kind of the gradient club is the size that it is, not because I couldn't make it bigger, not because there's not demand for it, but just for my mental health. I find that doing one day of dyeing all of the same thing is about as much as I can stand to do before I'm going, I'm so bored. And then when I get bored, you start to get sloppy, you start to lose concentration. And the dyeing is the fun part of my job in comparison to doing all the admin work. So the dyeing needs to be fun, because otherwise this job has lots and lots of computer work and not very much of stuff that's interesting. So yeah, so I don't dye very much to recipes. So most of the time when somebody says, oh, I bought this 2 years ago and I'd like some more of it, I sort of have to go, very sorry, I don't know how I dyed it. So there isn't any more. But with these ones, I've always got a recipe. So providing it's still a dye that I use, I can nearly always manage to replicate it. But yeah, and before I set the videos running, I was just doing some custom dyeing for some warps that somebody has ordered, with yarns that I've dyed before, so not completely brand new yarns to me, but just she wanted different variations on the warp length and the number of ends that were in it, because she wants them for specific projects and she's already got a draft picked out. So those, I've just got to do the weft yarn that's dyed to coordinate for her, because that's the other nice thing about custom dyeing the warps, is that if somebody wants matching wefts, I can accommodate that. Whereas I only sell the weft yarn undyed, because I haven't got the capacity in the space to start trying to dye weft yarn in every colour under the sun. Whereas when it's somebody who's ordered and said exactly what they want, I can go, yes, I can make that work for you. So that's our very, very palest colour. So you can see that only had 2 millilitres of dye on it. And you can see just how much colour that's given the fibre. These are really quite strong dyes with intensity of colour. You need surprisingly little dye to be able to dye these pale pastel colours. Let's wrap you up nice and tight. So that's 3 of the 5 done. Let's do the next one. And we shall. So we've got the 2 pinks left to go. There's the one that's the more peachy colour, and then there's the one that's the more purpley colour. And yeah, I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do about May's seasonal changes pack yet. The very end of April is Wonderwool Wales, which technically it's one weekend, but it's the setup on the Friday. I've usually loaded the van on the Thursday before. Most of the week before that is taken up with labelling stock to take with us to make sure that it's all got prices on it, because I don't have prices on anything in the studio, because depending on where you are in the world, depends on how much you pay, because it depends on whether you pay VAT or not, and some of the European countries have different rates of VAT. So because it's all sold online, it doesn't need to be priced, so I don't bother with that level of hassle until I need it to be priced to go to a show. And Wonderwool's the only show I do now. So, and everywhere else is kind of small scale enough that I can just have a price list and have a chat to people. Like a couple of weekends ago when I was up visiting York Guild for a talk and a workshop. So yes, I don't know when I'm going to fit in dyeing the May seasonal changes, and we get back. And by the time I've unloaded everything from the van, done the stock takes and everything else, it isn't then that long till I hurtle off to on holiday. So which is going to be my one big holiday of the year. We're going up to the Scottish Highlands, which is going to be really nice. Hopefully before the midges get too horrifically bad. So just been, that was another thing that was sorting out, was the person who's coming in house sitting for us, was his train transport and all the details about that. So yeah, it's been busy. I have lots of things to organise here. So watch this space as to what I decide to do about May's seasonal changes. It might be that I have a little break, or it might be that I will do it for like the last 2 weeks of May on a very, very limited edition. I suspect it depends entirely on how long it takes me to sort stuff out following Wonderwool. But we shall see. If I can dye it, I will do, because it is nice to have one for every single month of the year. And there are people who are doing all sorts of really fun things with the packs. They've got like holes, sort of, they're using them for blankets and like big scale projects. So but these they're in 20-gram chunks, which is quite nice, because it gives you kind of the equivalent of a commercially spun mini skein, for which there are lots and lots of patterns out there. So it's a really nice way of building up a colour palette of mini skeins that you can use for lots and lots of things. And the Cambrian wool works really nice for that. It's a little bit shinier than Shetland, for anybody who's like kind of thinking of what to compare it to. It's got a longer staple to it. It spins beautifully. There are people who are real fans of it. And it's got a nice durability to it. It's neither too soft. It's soft enough that most people can put it next to their skin, but it's not so soft that it's going to just wear out and start to pill really quickly. Sorry, that's probably horribly squeaky. It's what I call good versatile jumper wool. But you can use it for accessories and hats and things like that. So we have got 1, 2, 3 pinks, 2 greens, and I think that's going to be quite a nice colour palette. We'll see how it comes out in comparison once it's been heat set and dried. I'll take a look at it compared to the picture, see whether anything needs tweaking, but these should be ready to go into the shop on Monday, which I believe is the 1st of May. So yeah, so hopefully I will, if you're a member of the Fellowship of Yarn, for which is my community space. If you're watching on Instagram, there's a link in my bio to it. If you're watching on YouTube, there's a link in the description. That's where I kind of post. It's where I post the voting for the inspiration pictures for these, and it's also where I'll probably go, this is what I'm doing about recording and filming the set for May. Hope you all have a lovely rest of your day. I'm going to go in and have a cup of coffee and a piece of cake. And I shall see you all again at some point in the future.